As we were approaching 2015, everyone was getting ready to experience The Witcher 3 for the first time ever. Nvidia released the high-end GPUs for the 900 series in late 2014. So today, 8 years later, we are yet again approaching the release of The Witcher 3, but this time around, the remastered version. It's a bit crazy to think about, but the 900 series is approaching the 1 decade mark since it was released. Throughout the years, the Maxwell GPUs got quite a lot of praise, albeit with a bit of controversy considering exactly this GPU, the 970. It's supposedly having 4 gigs, which in reality turned out to be 3.5, with another 512 MB performing at a slower speed. Back in the day, that wasn't really a big deal, since even the best looking game, The Witcher 3, did not really use more than 2 or 3 gigs at 1080p with the maximum preset. But as the years have gone by, we are witnessing GPUs that have double-digit numbers in terms of VRAM capacity. So maybe that can be a bit of a problem today, but who knows? Let's find that out in some of the latest and greatest titles of recent times. Starting things off with the Mafia Remake, the 970 has no problems maintaining a decent average of around 45 FPS, with every settings turned up to the maximum value, and as the percentile figures show, the FPS is as stable as it gets. So a great start to the benchmarks for the 970. You can also turn down some of the settings to get closer to the 60 FPS figure, as the Mafia Remake still looks very good, even at some of the settings reduced. Next up is Dying Light 2, which is really pushing the 970 to its limits, while using the medium preset at 1080p, getting in return FPS which mostly stays above 30. It can drop into the mid-20s whenever there's a lot going on. You can try to tweak the settings a bit in order to get higher FPS. As I would do it, use the built-in FSR feature to get FPS above 40 with minimal loss in visual quality. But to be honest, without any tweaks, medium at 1080p is also enjoyable to me. As always, Days Gone is one of the best performing games in the benchmark list, even running on the very high preset on the 970, averaging around 40 to 50 FPS most of the time. Just a flawless experience, and of course, there is a lot of room to mess around with the settings to get even better FPS. Maybe even the maximum preset was possible, but considering the VRAM, and in my opinion, the maximum preset isn't really worth it. A mix of high and very high settings is the way to go here. God of War, to the other hand, requires you to turn down the settings to the original preset in order to get the best results when it comes to the mixture of quality and performance. Turning up the settings will decrease the FPS significantly. Seems like the VRAM situation of the 970 shows in this game very well. But honestly, without doing any tweaks, this is also a nice experience. And of course, the game supports FSR, so you can tweak it to your liking. Far Cry 6 is performing great with the GTX 970, the high preset giving in return FPS which hovers around the 60 FPS mark, although you can spot in the statistics that the game does come relatively close to using the full 16 gigs of RAM available on the system, with the VRAM being utilized at the full potential. So if you want to use any of these very capable 4 gig cards from the older generations, be sure to have 16 gigs of RAM, as any amount less than that can lead to bottlenecks, most probably not the greatest results. In Uncharted 4, the FPS really depends on the level you are at, with the opening rainy sequence barely getting above 30 FPS, but as you can see, this level performs much better, even leaving some room to use the higher settings. So keep that in mind, the game works great here, but it might be that in one of the future levels, these settings won't really be the best ones. Or it could be the complete opposite, where you can up the settings to medium or possibly high. Anyways, the game runs good enough in my opinion. Cyberpunk is the worst performing game of the day for sure, and somehow I'm not really surprised, to be honest. As you can see, we're using medium settings, barely getting FPS above 30. You may think turning down the settings might help, but not really. FPS goes up to 35, and on rare occasions to 40, and that's pretty much it. Cyberpunk seems either too unoptimized or too demanding for the 970. The last game of today is AC Valhalla, where it seems like I underestimated the GTX 970. Obviously, higher settings than medium are possible, but for the sake of stability I went with medium, getting 50 FPS most of the time. So nothing to complain about here, perfectly playable FPS with a mixture of decent visual quality. In conclusion, the GTX 970 still seems like a very capable card, but you have to keep in mind the price point at which the card sells for, which in my country is around $100. So if you think about it, for the same price you have the RX 570, a newer card which may perform similarly to the 970, which also is 2 years older than the 570. So it would be interesting to compare these two in a future video, and let you decide which one is the best option. If you already have the GTX 970, then you can stick with it for a couple of more years, at least until Nvidia decides to end driver support, which hopefully won't happen that soon. But you never know with Nvidia and especially AMD, who have discontinued perfectly capable cards from the 300 series of GPUs, released at the same time period as Maxwell cards. So that's another point to consider. So that's pretty much it for this video. The 970 was and still is a very capable card. I advise you to stick around to see my comparison of the RX 570 with the GTX 970. It'll be interesting to see which one comes out on top.